Okay, today we're going to talk about filming a feature film with the FS7. Get rid of this thing.
I am rolling. I am rolling. Rolling. Today we're talking about, first of all, our last shoot went beautifully. I don't know if we're gonna do a piece on it.
We already did.
We already did, so maybe I won't talk about that. So about 3 years ago, I joined the team, joined COMV, was asked to do some color correction, and we were shooting then on these older Sony cameras. It was really difficult. One, because I didn't know what I was doing. Two, well, I don't think we really knew what we were doing. I mean, we were used to those cameras. We knew what they would look like, but it was often very difficult to match shots together. And so when we decided to get new cameras, kind of get the next step up and spend thousands of dollars on equipment on our brand new Sony FS7, the A7S, bunch of new lenses as well. We were really excited, and I mean, we had been following cinematographers like Philip Bloom, and we saw how beautiful his stuff looked with the FS7 and the A7S, and how he could match the two cameras like nobody's business. So we went into it thinking, hey, we've got these awesome brand new cameras. Let's go shoot a 45-minute pilot with our brand new cameras, and hey, it's gonna be beautiful. We realized really quick that we didn't know what we were doing. And even just because we had these awesome cameras, we were still getting really crappy, I mean, just crappy footage. The two cameras looked totally different. The A7S really looked green, I remember. And so trying to match the two cameras together was incredibly difficult. And it all came down to not knowing the camera. And just because we had a nice camera didn't mean we knew how to use the camera. Okay, one of the specific tools that we ended up buying was a color checker. All of our shooting right now is pretty much outdoors, and it's been a long time since we've done anything that's an interior. And so the color checker just really helps us get our exposure right, even in situations where we don't really have too much control over what kind of light we're getting. A lot of the stuff we did before with the old cameras, and none of it was motivated. A lot of it was done on steady cam, just kind of running around. Just kind of literally running all over the place and kind of getting these crazy, what we thought were cool shots. And then we'd watch these, beautiful cinematic movies, and we couldn't understand what is different there. That's really when we started learning about movement and how important movement is. And if you don't master movement these days, you're probably not going to be a very good cinematographer. Good movement, planned movement, even unplanned movement that is motivated, it needs a reason. You always need a reason to move. And when there's a good reason to move, that's when it's going to look nice. It ended up being a combination of both learning how to move the camera and how to use the settings to the best of that camera's ability to capture what you need. Now it's been a couple years, we're used to the equipment. Weston knows all the settings and has them all honed into, depending on the situation, we can get what we want when we need it.
So we've been filming with the Sony FS7 since the end of 2014. To preface it, the reason why I bring this up, there was this intern at this marketing job that I was helping out with. In talking with the kid, I was like, how's it going? And he's like, well, it would be good, if I had like a red. And I just was thinking, man, if you had a red camera, you would have no clue what to do with it. And that's kind of what spurred this idea of what was it like for us having pushed ourselves as far as we thought we could go with our old cameras, and then getting into, a whole new level, going from, shooting with DSLR cameras and then moving up into an $8,000, cinema camera, it wasn't what we thought it would be. We were feeling a bit ambitious, and someone was looking for some help with a pilot episode for this TV spot that they were trying to pitch, and so we're like, yeah, we can help you out with that. So we hopped into it with the Sony FS7 and the brand new Sony A7S and started filming this. We knew that it could capture more dynamic range. We knew that, it could preserve the highlights in really bright situations. And so we started going in and shooting all these interviews. And when we started looking at the footage, it was like, man, this is really bad. We had been producing some pretty nice images with our old cameras, and it was like, as soon as we got these new cameras, it almost felt like we knew nothing. Through the next few months, we did a whole lot of research. We would look to other people who had the FS7. Philip Bloom was one person we looked to a lot, and it just was like, man, we had to relearn how to expose shooting with the FS7 and shooting an S-Log. What we realized was we were underexposing everything because we were trying to preserve the highlights, and we were obsessed with preserving the highlights. And then we were watching Saving Mr. Banks, and I realized, wow, that window is blown out. And then, watched another film, and it was like, wow, they're clipping the window. Wow, they're clipping that. And I realized it's okay to let things clip. The idea is to try to get your subject properly exposed. And that was something that we never really had thought about. It was like always just expose the whole image. But it was like, this is what we're focusing on, expose it so it looks good. And, as we were trying to go through this editing process of this pilot episode that we were working on, the people were always underexposed, and we try to bump it up. If you don't know this already, S-Log preserves the highlights, but when you start getting into the shadows, it gets really grainy really fast if you don't have the shadows properly exposed. And so as we're trying to amp up these skin tones, they're just grainy beyond all belief because we underexpose the skin tones to try to preserve our highlights. That experience led us to getting two things that really changed our process of cinematography. One was we bought Vincent LaFerray's directing motion course, and it just was mind-blowing to really start to understand motivated movement and when to motivate and when not to motivate and those emotions that it creates. And as we started, Drew and I dissecting that and taking notes and trying to apply it, all of a sudden our images felt a whole lot better. It had nothing to do with the camera, it just was moving it properly and realizing when not to move the camera. So that was a huge learning point for us. And then the second part was really buying an exposure card and using it as often as we can. We actually built a new slate so that we can have our exposure card on our slate when we clap it. Maybe a little bit overkill, but for us, we find it super helpful because every shot before we take it, it's check exposure, make sure it's at that 40% IRE in the middle gray, and we can trust it. That's one of those interesting things. People say this a lot, but we wanted to emphasize it really wasn't the equipment. The equipment took away the excuse. We had the exact same camera that we saw Philip Bloom shooting fantastic images on, and our images didn't come close to that. So we went back to the drawing room table, learned how to expose, learned how to do movement, and in the end, more recently, relearned how to light. We were using so many lights, it just was making everything look flat. And now we use only one light, and it just makes things pop and look beautiful, and learning where to put the sun, so it's helping us, get good shadows. It was learning those principles that made our cameras actually usable, and we've been able to make our old cameras look so much better just with the principles that we learned from realizing there was no excuse when we got our new cameras. And that's really been the biggest learning curve. They just announced the Sony Venice. And the Sony Venice looks like an awesome camera, and I'm really interested in it because of the ability to switch sensors and things like that, and it adds a lot of future proof. But do I feel like Navigator would be better benefited by us going out and purchasing that? No. To that kid who said that if only he could have a RED camera, things would look good. I would love for you to rent a RED camera, realize that, wow, you're shooting with the same camera that some professional movies have been made on, and your stuff doesn't look like a professional movie. And then from that, learn what things you need to work on. Work on your exposure, work on your motivated movement, work on your lighting, and figure it out that way. If any of you guys here in Salt Lake City feeling like we get good images because of the FS7, come on over, we'll let you shoot with the FS7. Shooting Navigator with the FS7, I mean, we could have shot it with the A7S. Just for us, we wanted a little bit more dynamic range, and, well, actually, we needed the 10-bit for doing HDR. And that was kind of like, for us, the FS7 is the lowest point that we could get into doing a feature film and keep it in 4K HDR. And that was that paintbrush that we needed to create the type of painting that we wanted. You know, do we need to go out and, you know, spin whatever they're going to announce the Venice at? It may allow us to do some different things in the production line, but it's not going to make the movie better. The movie is what it is because of, again, knowing how to expose right, knowing where to put the lighting, and in the end, because of the script and the story that we're trying to tell. Knowing how those shots flow together, knowing how they edit together. Just kind of as a little side note, so we have the first 2 minutes of Navigator fully edited together. There's no shots missing between. And even with how cool it looks, it's nothing without the audio. And so we're super excited to get it over to our audio guy to start putting in and designing the sound and the footsteps and the environment. And that is what will bring it to that next level, that audio piece. And then the color correction will bring it to the next level. And it's like, the footage is this foundation, but there's so much more to do on top of it. And so if we're putting all of our effort into getting an amazing camera for the foundation, we're forgetting to put money into the rest of the house. And we're just going to have, you know, an empty foundation without, you know, a roof or anything like that. So yeah, Kyle, it's up to you. I don't know what you can edit in there. Hey guys, thanks for watching all the way through. It was a little more long-winded on this episode. Want to give a huge shout out to our Tier 3 Patreon supporters. Their input has been awesome on moving forward with the script. If you yourself want to be involved with the movie more than just behind the scenes, head on over to the Patreon. Thanks for all your comments and requests and the behind the scenes of making Navigator.